Hey Hillvue, we're so glad you could join us tonight as we continue to celebrate Holy Week. Let's worship together. Peace, bring it all to peace. The storm surrounding me, let it break at your name still. the sea to still, the rage in me to still every wave at your name. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, your silence real. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Breathe, call these bones to live, and call these lungs to sing once again. I will praise Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, your silence feel. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, oh, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, your silence feel. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, oh, your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is alive, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. It's Jesus, Jesus, your silence feel. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, oh, we sing your mighty name. Oh, your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is alive, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Oh, your name is alive, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, your silence feel. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, oh.
We walk into this night, and for the first time in our lives, in our journey together, in this moment of history, we're walking into the Thursday night, and we are somewhat aware of what it was like for Jesus that night. He was isolated, yet around a few, He was still isolated, yet in just a few moments, he's going to be surrounded by many. He went on. The disciples' feet have been washed. Jesus' feet have been anointed by the woman there in Bethany. Jesus has broken bread and blessed the cup with his disciples. He has told Judas to go and do what you must do. And then he heads to this place that apparently those of us who believe in Jesus Christ, instead of enter in, we want to walk around it. We want to have Bible studies about it. We want to pray circling it. But very few of us want to enter into it. You got to go into the garden. And the garden has beautiful moments, but it tells a story for thousands of years. I had the privilege of walking in to most possibly that spot that Jesus at least was near there in Gethsemane. It is a place of twisted trees. And so for just a moment, I want you to see the trees that Jesus walked into, the twisted trees, those twisted trees. I want you to see that Jesus is going to a place to prepare himself in prayer, a place that the Father led him to, a dark place, a place that he wasn't sure he wanted to enter in. Isn't that where we are in this moment? A dark place, an uncertain place, a place that we're not sure. We're not sure of. It tells us in the scripture in Matthew, then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane. So right now, tonight, I invite you to this dark place called Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, now listen to this, because as I went over this again today, the Lord said, this is where you are for a moment. And this is what I need you to be. Notice, I used the word that we hate worse than anything. This is what I need you to be. He gave them, I need you to be in this moment. I need you to sit here. I don't need you to move. I don't need you to go back and do dinner. I don't need you to clean the dishes. Sit here while I go over there and pray. And taking with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. In this moment, you and I may be very sorrowful and troubled. Part of our trouble is we don't know the unknown. Well, you know what? In the beginning, we didn't know the unknown either. In fact, even though Peter, James, and John, look, just 3 people, they were practicing social distancing long before we got there. And if you notice, this is a spiritual moment. This enters into the way of the cross. And Jesus said, you sit here while I go there. Because what I'm fixing to become, you can't even imagine. And what I am fixing to do, only I can do. And we cannot assist Jesus as he brings grace. You know what God's asked us to do as faithful believers? Sit here. He's asking us for a moment to separate from the gathering so we might discover the Christ. I've preached for years that sometimes we can't see gatherings, we can't see Jesus because we get caught up in the gathering. Even ask yourself, do you miss gathering together because of the presence of the Lord? Or do you miss gathering together because you can't see and be? Or is it really more, you can't be seen? And when you walk through Holy Week, it's dark. It's dynamic. It's troubling. As Jesus walks into this garden, his soul, the very essence of who he is, his flesh is troubled. He's sorrowful. He is feeling all the weight of humanity. Sit here and watch me. By the way, I'm going to recommend that for the Church of Jesus Christ in this moment of time. Now, we in our church, we believe that God is sovereign. We believe that he's absolute. We believe what he declares and what he does is what he means and where we're supposed to be. And you know what? If we were supposed to be gathered together this Easter, we would be gathered together this Easter. But we're not even supposed to be gathered together this Easter. And let me give you some great news. God doesn't need us gathered together to have Easter. Because God is the one that gave us Easter. Man did not create Easter. Religious tradition did not create Easter. And you and I cannot bring Easter. Because you see, we can't drink the cup. And Jesus begins to pray. If you read over in the Gospel of Luke, he is so troubled that his flesh becomes so weak that he begins to sweat blood because the monumental moment of grace in the absolute wrath that you and I deserve is now coming upon the flesh of Jesus Christ. And even the flesh that he is given cannot contain the sorrowful, dark moment. And he says, Father, if it be possible, if there's a chance, let this cup pass from me. It's probably a prayer that every one of us have prayed over and over again in our present moment. Lord, let this be over. I'm so tired of everybody saying, well, we're going to have to get used to a new normal. Well, let me help you. The normal wasn't that great. Maybe we need to get away from being normal or a new normal, and maybe we need to really learn what it means to be faithful. And sometimes to be faithful means to sit here, to pray, to know who Jesus is. In fact, in this moment of history, as we have walked through Holy Week, you are walking through the most authentic experience of Holy Week that you've ever walked through, because it was not executed in the synagogue or the gathering of the religious. It was brought in the very world of the home, in an upper room, in a home in Bethlehem, in places that nobody else gathered in. Jesus gathered with the 12. And even one of them was appointed to betray the Lord. Well, as you know, he came back from praying a blood-oozing prayer. And he came to his disciples, watch this, and found them sleeping. I'm afraid if we look deeply, which we've been doing a lot, the Lord has found us sleeping. I know in my own life he's found me sleeping more than once. Then they left. Look at this. The followers that were with Jesus on the night that he would be betrayed couldn't simply do what he asked them to do. Sit here. We've been asked to sit and to separate so life can go on. And as believers, we ought to take that very seriously. Because on this Holy Week, death is in the air. Many today, as I speak, have lost their earthly life. What should break our hearts in the church is how many of them have lost life forever. You see, Jesus was doing something that nobody could do but God. How many of y'all understand that? Jesus was doing something that nobody could do but God. You know who's going to heal this virus? God. You know who's in control right now? God. You say, Pastor Steve, well, why is there chaos? There's a divine purpose. And our job is not to try to fix it, to bring it back like it was, but to sit and to pray and to ask God to reveal truth. Maybe we need to learn that some of the things we feel that we believe that feel so true, maybe we'll find out they're not so true. Jesus is the truth, the way, the life. And they leave the garden. Now note, as they leave the garden, Jesus is leaving the garden with three people that couldn't do what he asked them to do. Then the crowd arrives. And while he was still speaking, came one of the 12, and with him a great crowd. Now, if you really read the Bible, the crowd has never been the point. I just want you to stay focused through this Easter, because this could be the greatest Easter ever. Many of you in America have been praying, like our congregation has been praying, that there would be a revival in our country, that there would be a wake-up, that there would be a sense of spirituality. But let me tell you what God doesn't need anymore. He doesn't need our religious activity. God knows if that would change nations and worlds, our world would be changed. But it's not. And here's why. You see, we like to be appointed. And we forget that God's called us to be anointed. You know, Pharaoh was appointed to have a hardened heart. Saul was appointed as a king. And Judas was appointed to betray Jesus. In fact, as you sit there and pray, you might want to evaluate why you're so proud of your appointment. Many of us in the ministry, I have been appointed to this task. You know what Jesus says? So what? Have you been anointed to this moment? And I think we who believe in Jesus Christ have. Because you know what? Jesus walks through what nobody else can go through. I was asked in a conversation the other day, most people refer to me as Ayers. They said, Ayers, what do you think the greatest thing the church could be doing right now? I said, well, the one thing it always refuses to do, share Jesus. You know what the most significant thing for a person on a ventilator is that they have a relationship with Jesus Christ. Because if they stay on one very long, they're going to be in a moment of judgment. And the only way to work through a moment of judgment, the only way to work through that moment of judgment is to know that Jesus Christ did not let this cup pass, but he drank the cup that only he could drink. Well, if you notice, Peter becomes very interesting on this Thursday night. Now, he couldn't do what Jesus asked him to do. Sit there and pray. And he fell asleep. I don't know, we could surmise. Probably not much fame, fanfare, not much glory given if you just sit there and pray. But if you draw your sword and cut the ear off the guard, then it makes you look like you're participating in this grand scheme. Jesus looks at Peter with those eyes and places the ear that Peter had cut off back on the guard. And I think it was at that moment that Peter realized he had no participation in the next few days. As Jesus is arrested, I want you to really notice this, and this is where I want to focus tonight. And then those who had seized Jesus led him to Caiaphas, the high priest. Now, the high priest, as Dr. Ward told us, was appointed by God. Did you catch that? He was appointed by God to be the high priest. But the high priest of the universe, who stands before Caiaphas, arrested and bound, was anointed to be the Son of God and the merciful atonement for all sin. Church, may we take an inward evaluation of our appointments, and may we take less pride in them than we previously have. And may we look more fervently into the anointed than the appointed. Because the anointed, they will do what the anointed says. But the appointed, they will get a little loose. Because they're more concerned about their religious system. And as I face this Thursday night, I have had to confess to God, oh my God, I have been Caiaphas. I have been like this high priest, caught up in the busyness of an evangelical church, and many times have missed the anointed God who said, Pastor, sit there and discover who I am. Have you discovered in these moments of stillness who Jesus is? Jesus is not found, nor is he invoked by human activity. He comes in divine surrender and stands before Caiaphas. Anyway, he's a high priest. He's probably got 2 PhDs in the Torah. He has studied. He's complete. As Jamie and Jeff told you, he is the one that will deliver the sacrifice, the bound sacrifice in the forgiveness of sin for God's people. But yet, the anointed of God stands before him. And notice now, Peter was following at a distance, as far as the courtyard of the high priest. And going inside, he sat with the guards to see. And now the chief priest and the whole council, here's what they were doing. seeking false testimony against Jesus, that they might put him to death. Isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing that the appointed high priest is going to make the anointed high priest subject to his way? You see, sometimes you are appointed to be the one that looks like you're right, so God can show you that he is right. Caiaphas, Judas, a political schemer, Saul, a king envious of power, the Pharaoh in all of his glory, and then the Spirit of God's mercy, that in this Passover and Easter week removes the chains of bondage, takes on the destitute, sorrowful ending of death, and brings life. And the high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer?" Because he had been asked a question. Who are you? Though many false witnesses came forward, at last 2 came forward and said, "This man said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. And the high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer to make?" Can you hear the pride, the arrogance, the gotcha? So, Jesus, do you have no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you? Now, note this. I've learned this in my life. I have found that those who aren't certain make a lot of noise. And those who believe can remain silent. For they have nothing to prove because they know. They know this is the Christ. And Jesus knows he is the Messiah, the anointed. Jesus remained silent, and the high priest said to him, "I adjure you, by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." Jesus said to him, "You have said so." Caiaphas confessed truth once again, even though he didn't know it was true. Be careful who you write off in this world, because God uses everybody in this world. And maybe we will learn from this moment in history that all of us that live are essential. And all of us that remain are here to show the glory of God. Sometimes that means go into the garden, and sometimes that means sit here and pray. The high priest then tore his clothes and said, "He has utterly blasphemed. What further witness do we need? You have now heard this blasphemy. What is your judgment?" And they answered, "He deserves death." In all of their intellect, in all of their prowess, in all of their accusation, in all of their appointed glory for the moment, they believed they could determine eternity. But as they spoke in foolishness, God speaks with truth. This is hard to bear. Then they spit in his face and they struck him. And some slapped him, saying, Prophesy to us, you Christ. Who is it that struck you? What amazes me is in the midst of this agony, Jesus was in complete and total control. He submitted to the death of foolish and lying humans so that foolish and lying humans might be saved. Glory be to God. And in the place of crooked trees, in a garden that laid dark and misty and eerie, he said, Father, not my will, but yours. Let that echo tonight. Father, not my will, but yours. As you pray there with your family tonight, pray, Father, not my will, but yours. It takes Jesus to pray that prayer because we've seen Peter wasn't capable of praying it. John wasn't capable of praying it. James is not capable of praying it. Judas doesn't even think about praying it. Caiaphas, a professional religious prayer who can enter the Holy of Holies because God appointed him to do so, he can't pray it. You say, well, what happened after that? Those of you that were in Israel with us, you remember what happened after that. As we stood in that outer court where that night they spit in Jesus' face, on inside that court there is a pit. There's a pit of about 20 feet deep. There's a dark, nasty, dungy, eerie pit. We would refer to it today in the prison system as the hole, solitary confinement. They're going to send me to the hole. You know what they did? They sent Jesus to the hole. After they beat on him, they would place ropes underneath his arms, and they lowered him into total darkness. And in that moment, Psalm 88 became revealed. God never misses a word. Hear the psalm as we close tonight. But hear this, there is an anointed God that has anointed us as a church for this moment. In fact, we're not going to miss Easter. We may understand Easter at this moment like we should understand Easter. It's not about dressing up. It's not about having a big loud church service. It's about recognizing that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. He is the only way. He is the truth. He is the forgiver. He is the lover. He takes our sin and takes God's wrath. And in darkness, the psalm echoes from a pit of darkness where our Savior is stored for the night, until further liars will get a hold of the situation. I want you to see that in this garden, truth and lies are colliding constantly on this Thursday night. The truth as Jesus breaks the bread, I am the body. The truth as Jesus digests the cup and says, I am the new covenant. The continuation of the promise of Abraham. But in the pit, and quite honestly, many of us tonight may feel like we're in the pit. But I'm going to encourage you, my brothers and sisters in Christ, do not waste a moment. Do not waste a moment. In the stillness that God has provided, discover that He is the anointed Son of God. I know one of the things that I had to shed out of my life is busyness. Busyness is an idol for many people. A lot of my colleagues like to tell me how busy they are. If you look at the fruit on the vine, they would be better to not confess that so loudly. Because sometimes we're busy doing what we want to do instead of what God says to do. And sometimes God says, sit here and pray. And sometimes God says, be still and know that I am God. And usually after He says that, then He says, go. But we like to go and come back and sit still to ask God how we've done. Where God says, why don't you listen in the first place? So listen in darkness for just a moment. O Lord, God of my salvation, I cry out day and night before you. Let my prayer come before you. You feel the garden? Incline your ear to my cry, for my soul is full of troubles, and my life draws near to Sheol. I am counted among those who go down to the pit. I am a man who has no strength, like one set loose among the dead, like the slain that lie in the grave, like those whom you remember no more, for they are cut off from your hand. You have put me in the depths of the pit, in the regions dark and deep. Your wrath lies heavy upon me, and you overwhelm me with all your waves. Selah. You have caused my companions to shun me. You have made me a horror to them. I am shut in so that I cannot escape. My eyes grow dim through sorrow. Every day I call upon you, O Lord. I spread out my hands to you. Do you work wonders for the dead? Do the departed rise up to praise you? Selah. Is your steadfast love declared in the grave? I'll read that one more time. Is your steadfast love declared in the grave? Or your faithfulness in Abaddon? Are your wonders known in the darkness, or your righteousness in the land of forgetfulness? Let's pause for a minute. Are your wonders known in the darkness, or your righteousness in the land of forgetfulness? Lord, I pray right now for our nation. We have become a nation that has forgotten your truth, your principles, your teachings, your ways. your love for all of us, no matter what circumstance in life. Lord, thank you that in the darkness of the pit, you forget not. But I, O Lord, cry to you. In the morning my prayer comes before you. O Lord, why do you cast my soul away? Why do you hide your face from me? Afflicted and close to death from my youth up, I suffer your terrors. I'm helpless. Your wrath has swept over me. Your dreadful assaults destroy me. They surround me like a flood all day long. They close in on me together. You have caused my beloved and my friend to shun me. My companions have become my darkness. Tonight, as we have entered into this garden, may we not be companions of darkness. And may we learn tonight, tomorrow night, especially on that silent Saturday. Maybe for many of us, we need to turn everything off and sit there and pray. I've prayed that prayer through my journey of following Jesus Christ. If a people called by your name would humble themselves and pray for the nation, it would be restored. And I really believe the reason we haven't seen that's a conditional prayer. Maybe it's time for us to humble ourselves. And I know it's been aggravating. I join in your aggravation. What can I do in this moment? Sit there, pray, believe, and know that the God that entered eternal darkness, that the God that sent his Son Jesus into the darkest moment of human reality will be the light. May we be a light in the midst of a dark, dark world. Sit there.